Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here. We have a series of record-breaking storms that just has no end in sight. So let's take a look at the overall satellite picture this morning, and you can actually see the newest atmospheric river event that's pounding the west coast with more high winds and heavy rain for them. And we've got plenty of storms that trail behind this one, while the rest of the country is more likely under a zonal flow. That's a warmer flow, but it's pretty quiet right now as well. And it's also quiet out in the open waters of the Atlantic as well, into the Caribbean. So going forward over the next 5 days, the jet stream is going to be perfectly aligned where these series of storm systems that are going to be coming in every couple of days or so, that's going to be pounding the west coast with more heavy rain, while most of the systems really don't get past the Rocky Mountains here, and there's more or less like confined out into the west coast, while you experience those warmer conditions as well. So if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns on North America, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily reports on this channel. It's also important to hit the like button as well. It definitely helps out more than you know. So let's delve into the details. Over the last 7 days, you can see it was pretty wet across a good part of the country, an exception to the mid central part of the US. But these systems down here, the National Weather Service did in fact complete all their surveys from January 2nd through the 4th time frame, and they found 54 tornadoes during that tornado outbreak that we highlighted 7 days prior from this big storm setup that unfolded just right after New Year's. But wow, well out of the west coast, that's where we had all the heavier rain that's fallen over the last 7 days, and most of this over portions of Nebraska and South Dakota was in the form of snow, was heavier rains. And some of these areas actually outperformed, was South Dakota picking up around 27 inches of snowfall. So going forward, let's take a look at these reservoirs in California, because I showed you all the rain that's took place already. We've already seen a lot of rainfall. In fact, about 10 inches just in San Francisco downtown alone over the last 10 days. So obviously that has helped these reservoirs. We've been in a severe drought for many years in this area. So but we still have a long ways to go. So most of these, this is capacity rates, right? 31%. The highest one I can actually even find is 72%, but most of them 29%, 36%. Trinity's still 24%. Shasta, some of the bigger watersheds at 35%. Oroville's at 41%. But we made drastic improvements. I mean, just about 10 days ago, this was sitting at about 29% capacity. Now we're at 41. But look at the historical average, 77%, right? So we got a long ways to go. So obviously this rainfall coming for California is much needed, but it's going to come with the price and inform with a lot of widespread flooding, power lines down, tree lines coming down on those power lines with those higher winds are going to be taking place. So let's break this thing down for you over the next 48 hours. So we are going to be watching a little bit of a short wave that's going to be coming across the deep south. So it's going to miss most of the country, but it's going to be elongated down further into South Texas, into places like Victoria, into the Houston area, say Baton Rouge, into Shreveport. Those areas could pick up some rainfall, but especially New Orleans, getting into Jackson, places into Birmingham, going into Atlanta again, into the Tennessee Valley, getting some rainfall over the next 48 hours, while we have the West Coast getting to that, that storm system that's coming in today will be the leftovers for tomorrow. So between now and the next 48 hours, you got heavy rain pounding the coast, mainly elongated into California, with lighter amounts as you head up to portions of Oregon and Washington, and then just basically falls. It just pretty much evaporates once it gets past into portions of Utah. It's really confined to the West Coast. So, but the winds are going to be a concern. So as these systems come in, they're going to be packing a punch. So you got high winds, and that's why I'm very concerned with all those power lines down. You saw the saturated soils. So it's not going to take much when you get wind gusts of 60 miles an hour on those trees, and they're going to topple over. They could fall into power lines. That's going to cause power outages. So it's a compounding effect that are going to be involved with the combination of the heavy winds and the rain in this area. That's why we're talking about widespread flooding and power outages, unfortunately, and mudslides is going to be a huge concern going forward, especially in and along the West Coast. So, but it doesn't stop there. We got yet an even more powerful system that comes in on Monday. Take a look at the latest water vapor transport index. This tells you how much water is available in the atmosphere. And this is literally almost off the charts, guys. All that deep purple down back here, that's literally almost off the charts here. So that tells you there's a lot of water that's going to be heading towards California with all that system that's coming in today. But a renewed, even stronger system comes in for Monday with more high winds and more heavy rain, with another, significant 994 millibar low pressure center going to be pounding the coast with more heavy rainfall. And the snow is going to be really prolific in the mountain regions with extreme impacts unfolding. Snowfall rates 3 upwards almost 7 inches an hour at times in portions of the mountains here into Mount Shasta. Those areas are going to just get pounded with very heavy snow over a series of days. So yes, the concern is going forward is these flash flood watches, these renewed flash flood watches between now and the 10th. Just between now and the 10th, we could be looking at least, on a conservative basis, 2 to 3 inches in the valleys, 3 to 6 inches in the hills, 8 to 10 inches into some of these mountain regions. That's going to cause widespread flooding into multiple mud and landslides as well. Some of those roads could be impassable, and with all the rapid rises in the rivers as well, as this water is really not going to have anywhere to go with the very heavy rainfall on a short time basis. But look at this. This is pretty insane. What we're looking at here is the Ensemble Guidance, the EPS guidance of the European guidance over the next 15 days for Mount Shasta. I think it's going to snow. Okay. I think it's actually going to snow. To break it down for you, the lowest one I could actually find is about 54 inches. And the highest ones are around 150 something inches. So you're talking, the ensembles are printing out on a minimum basis 5 feet to upwards to 12 feet of snowfall just in the next 10 to 14 days for Mount Shasta. If you want to see some snow, you just head out there. There's going to be plenty of snow. Okay, plenty of snow. And the good thing is all that's got to melt sometime. And so that's gonna help fill up the reservoirs as well. But for the rest of the country, it's like, hey, where's all the Arctic air? Well, Santa Claus took it. It went back up into the North Pole, into the Arctic. That's where the cold air is, because it's not in the lower 48. It's not in Canada either. Alaska's warm, Canada's warm, much of the U.S. is warm. So there's only little subtle signs where it's actually even somewhat below average is where it's going to be raining over the next 7 to 10 days as well. So there's not much really cold air to speak of, at least for the next 7 to 10 days. But here's the setup for Monday. Like I mentioned, much of the West Coast just steals all the rain out of the atmosphere, because once it hits the mountain regions, it just falls apart, and the rest of the country is pretty dry, right? Here's the red line. That's your freezing line. We can't even get freezing temperatures as far south as Iowa for January 9th, right? So there's not much cold air to talk about, but there's a lot of rain to talk about for sure. And it's very concerning with all the compounding effect that's going to hit the West Coast. And it's not just a California thing. There's still some heavier rains into portions of Washington and Oregon. So definitely be concerned up there in that region. But as we get deeper into the week, and especially into Monday with that bigger system, a lot of that's going to be confined to the northern areas, but it is going to be sneaking further south into the central California. It'll eventually creep down into southern California as well. But going forward into Thursday, I think that's when a system finally makes it past the Rockies. So, and it's going to have a little bit of a dip. I mean, it's going to bring down a little bit of colder air. Not Arctic. Definitely not Arctic, but it's a little cooler. I would say cooler for January standards, because this is January 12th now at what we're looking at by Thursday. but we are going to have a little bit of low pressure center. That's going to kick off some showers and thunderstorms across the Missouri Valley into portions of East Texas back into Arkansas. You can actually see that on the surface map on Thursday with a little bit of colder air. I mean, look at the red line. That's your freezing line. So, I mean, it's hard pressed to get freezing temperatures even into Kansas. That's why I'm talking it's cooler. It's definitely not Arctic. But, I mean, there's going to be some rain showers that's going to be breaking out into Kansas and Missouri, back into Illinois, into portions of Arkansas. It's going to start in East Texas and move off into Louisiana, back into Mississippi as well. That's the day on Thursday. But what's going to happen as we go into next weekend is we're going to have this little trough. That's going to be the significance of this trough that's going to be coming in. It's going to be really building across the southeast, going to be increase the instability, going to dive down into the southeast, more rainfall for them, more rainfall for Florida, while we still have another system going to be keeping our eyes on out west with another atmospheric river event. But there's not much cold air, right? I mean, this is Friday. It's hard to snow when it's 15, 20 to 25 degrees above average. I mean, even the middle of January, it's still hard to snow in this type of atmosphere, but the warmth is just going to add heat to the atmosphere. With this trough coming in, I'm going to be more concerned about the heavy rain that comes up the East Coast versus any type of snow that might unfold, because it looks like more of a rain event versus any snow event, at least at this stage. So yeah, going forward in the next weekend, so we're going to be watching this significant trough that's going to be just kind of hanging out, right, tapping into some of these warmer waters off the East Coast here. And then once that transports northbound, the ridge lifts north. I mean, look at the freezing line. Look at the freezing line for the middle of January, folks. I mean, it's not even in New England. That's why we're talking about very heavy rain for this region's tapping into that warm atmosphere. And this, I would probably be concerned going into next weekend about some significant, flooding that could unfold across the Northeast with this newest setup that's going to be, won't be until next weekend. But I mean, look at the train that just still impacts the West Coast. The entire state of California is lit up across the board with green. That's a lot of rainfall in that area. But we do see signs of hope. We do see signs of hope in the longer range. So if you're winter lovers, we do see signs, because I think with that trough coming in by Thursday, that's going to sneak across the East Coast by next weekend. What that's going to do is that's going to lift this ridge, these positives, a little bit further north, right? So that as these troughs continue to come in out west, that's going to be able to sneak in under those positives and finally bring down a little bit more colder air into the lower 48. But we got a long ways to go. We still got a lot of warmth to deal with between now and the next, essentially, probably 2 weeks. So I am expecting a little bit of a change going forward, but I don't really think it happens until fucking like the 19th and 20th time frame before we can even think about some colder air again. So, but obviously with all the warmer air around, there ain't much snow, folks. This is the blend of the models. I mean, there's not much snow to print. I mean, this is a 7-day map, 8-day map. I mean, there's not much snow to speak of. It's well to the north up in Canada, and even Canada, that's not much snow. Where it is snowing is Mount Shasta. All out in the Intermountain West. I mean, you got plenty of snow out there. So if you want to go see some snow, you just got to head out west. There's plenty of it. So, but the main concern is all the prolific rain. I mean, look at the ensemble guidance of the above average precipitation anomalies for the next 10 days. I mean, that is a huge area of 5 times above average. I mean, that's basically off the charts for this huge area in California. That's why we're expecting a ton of water over the state of California over the next 10 days, while much of the country gets impacted with these short waves that come across. But then I'm going to be concerned about some flooding going into next weekend for the Northeast. I'm pretty concerned about this setup because in this area, they can only handle like a ½ inch to an inch an hour, right? This doesn't drain as quick. So it don't take much to have flooding conditions up here. So we're looking at some very heavy rainfall potentially up this sector going into next weekend. and across the Northeast. So let's break this thing down for you and break it down into 5-day increments, because like I mentioned, the first 5 days, that system technically really doesn't make it past the Intermountain West. It doesn't really make it past the Rockies. All the actions with these short waves that coming across the deep south, much of the country is pretty clear. Across the middle of the country, any action is going to be further south into South Texas, across that short wave into Louisiana and the Mississippi and Alabama, heading into the Tennessee Valley. But all the actions off the West Coast. I mean, California just robs the atmosphere with all the water that's going to be transporting in that region and just dumps it on that region with very heavy rainfall. I'm concerned about widespread flooding into that region. And then if you compound that with from Thursday going into next weekend, with that trough coming in and just going to be sitting pretty off the East Coast, taking advantage of all that warmer waters off in the Atlantic, that is going to be a compounding effect. And I'm pretty concerned about very heavy rainfall in portions of New York City, Massachusetts, and to Rhode Island, and to Vermont, and New Hampshire, Connecticut. Those areas could get pounded with very heavy rain. And then the West Coast is just a compounding effect. So definitely concerned about very heavy rainfall. You've seen all this rain that's unfolded just in the last 7 to 10 days. This train don't have a caboose, guys. There's no end in sight that I can see in the next 10 days with these series of storms that are going to be coming in and pounding the West Coast. So I appreciate you guys watching. Do follow me on Instagram and Twitter as well as Facebook. I do update on those channels platforms as well. So catch me in the next update where I protect you before and after the storm.